The human ship moved slowly toward the giant space station. Jake Morrison stood at the front window and watched the structure grow larger. The Galactic Council station was bigger than any city on Earth. It spun around a dead star that gave off strange blue light. Jake felt nervous but tried not to show it. He was the first human ambassador to meet the alien council. Behind him stood 3 other humans. Dr. Lisa Carter knew many alien languages. Colonel Pete Rodriguez was their military expert. Maria Santos understood different cultures. The 4 humans had trained for years for this moment. Earth had waited 300 years to join the galactic community. Now they finally had the chance to prove humans belonged among the stars. The docking bay was enormous. Ships from dozens of different worlds sat in neat rows. Some looked like metal insects. Others seemed made of crystal or pure energy. The human ship looked small and plain next to these advanced vessels. Jake walked down the ramp with his team behind him. The station's air smelled different from Earth air. It had a metallic taste that made him want to cough. Alien sounds echoed through the vast space as different species talked in languages humans had never heard. A tall, insect-like creature approached them. It had 4 arms and a head that looked like it was made of metal plates. When it spoke, the words came out as clicking sounds that a small device translated into English. "I am Hive Speaker Zaxth," the creature said. "Welcome to Council Station. Though I wonder if you humans are ready for what you will find here." Jake kept his face calm even though the alien's tone was not friendly. "Thank you for the welcome. Humanity is honored to be here." Zaxth made more clicking sounds that might have been laughter. "We shall see about that honor." The alien led them through long corridors filled with beings that looked nothing like humans. Some floated in the air without touching the ground. Others had so many arms that Jake lost count. A few seemed to be made of living light that changed colors as they moved. Many of these creatures stopped what they were doing to stare at the humans. Jake heard whispers in languages he could not understand, but the tone was clear. These beings were not impressed by humanity. The council chamber was the largest room Jake had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. Thousands of seats arranged in circles held representatives from across the galaxy. At the center sat a being with 4 arms and skin that looked like ancient tree bark. "That is Council Prime Zendara," Lisa whispered. "Her people have led the council for over 2,000 years. Zendara raised one of her 4 arms, and the chamber fell silent. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of ages. "Humans of Earth," she began, "your species has asked to join our peaceful union of worlds. We have watched you for 500 of your years. What we have seen troubles us." Jake stepped forward. "Honored Council Prime, humanity comes in peace. We wish only to learn from your wisdom and contribute to galactic civilization." "Contribute?" A new voice spoke from the seats above them. The speaker was a large reptile creature with scales that looked like armor. "Your people cannot even unite your own world. You have had weapons that could destroy your planet for centuries. Yet you still fight wars over pieces of land." Laughter filled the chamber. Not human laughter, but the sounds different species made when they found something funny. Clicking, whistling, and vibrations that Jake felt in his bones. "General Mordak speaks truth," said another delegate. This one looked like it was made of living crystal. "We are the Altarians. We have studied your radio signals for decades. Your people argue constantly. You fight over resources while sitting on a world rich enough to support billions more." Jake felt his team tense behind him, but he kept his voice steady. "Every species has had conflicts in its past. Humanity has learned from our mistakes and grown stronger. Have you?" Zendara's 4 eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Your United Earth government was formed only 50 years ago. Many regions of your world still resist its authority. You call this growth?" A floating creature that looked like a jellyfish made of light pulsed different colors as it spoke. The Luminari find human behavior unpredictable and dangerous. Your emotional responses cloud. Logical thinking. This makes you unsuitable for civilized society. Furthermore, added the crystal being, your military history shows a tendency toward violence that concerns the Council. We have achieved peace through unity and wisdom. Humans seem to prefer conflict and chaos. Jake looked around the chamber and saw the same expression on thousands of different faces. These beings thought humans were primitive and dangerous. They saw Earth's history of war and conflict as proof that humanity was not ready to join their advanced civilization. Hive Speaker Zakath clicked his mandibles together. Perhaps humans need another 1,000 years to mature. Your technology has advanced quickly, but wisdom takes much longer to develop. The Council has discussed humanity's application at length, Zendara announced. We have reached a decision. Humanity will be granted observer status for 1 galactic year. During this time, you may watch our proceedings and learn our ways. If you prove worthy, we will consider full membership. Jake felt disappointment wash over him, but he kept his diplomat's mask in place. We are grateful for any opportunity to prove ourselves. Observer status means you may watch but not speak unless directly asked, General Mordak explained with what looked like a smile. You will be given quarters appropriate to your rank and access to cultural learning materials. As the formal session ended, delegates from various species approached the human group. None of them seemed interested in friendship. They studied the humans like scientists examining interesting animals. So these are the famous Earth humans, said a being with tentacles instead of arms. I expected them to be taller. Their technology is impressive for such a young species, admitted another creature that looked like a walking plant. But technology without wisdom leads to destruction. Jake listened to comment after comment. Some aliens seemed curious about human culture. Others made jokes about Earth's violent history. A few simply stared as if they could not believe such primitive beings had reached the stars. That evening, the human team gathered in their assigned quarters. The rooms were comfortable, but clearly designed to remind them of their low status. Everything from the furniture to the air recycling system was slightly different from what they were used to. Well, that could have gone worse, Pete said, though. His military bearing could not hide his disappointment. Could it have? Maria asked. They treated us like children who had wandered into an adult conversation. Lisa was already working on her translation equipment, analyzing the different languages they had heard. The interesting thing is that most of their criticisms were not wrong. We do have a history of conflict. We are unpredictable compared to them. Our world government is still new and fragile. But they are missing something important, Jake said. Every species in that chamber achieved peace the same way. They either forced unity through technology, eliminated differences through genetic engineering, or conquered their opposition. They all chose one path and stuck to it. And we chose differently, Maria realized. We kept our diversity. We learned to work together without becoming the same. Pete nodded. Every one of those species solved conflict by removing it entirely. We solved it by managing it. That is a very different approach. Jake stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, where 4 billion humans were counting on this mission to succeed. The Council saw humanity's differences as weaknesses, but Jake wondered if they might actually be strengths. We have a year to prove ourselves, he said finally. Let us show them what humans can really do. None of them knew that events were already in motion that would test everything the Council thought it knew about warfare, survival, and the value of being unpredictable in a universe full of ancient threats. 3 months passed like a slow torture for the human delegation. The Galactic Council tested them every day, but the tests seemed designed to make them fail rather than succeed. They were given impossible diplomatic puzzles to solve, outdated technology to work with, and constantly reminded that they were only observers. Jake sat in the cramped observer section during the monthly council meeting. The seats were uncomfortable, and the translation equipment barely worked. From here, he could barely see the main speakers, and the sound quality made it hard to follow complex discussions. Council Prime Zendara stood at the center of the chamber. Her four arms moving in patterns that Jake had learned meant she was announcing something important. "The human delegation has completed their third monthly evaluation," she declared. Her voice carried clearly through the chamber while Jake had to strain to hear every word from his distant seat. "Their performance has been measured and found adequate in basic diplomatic protocol." Jake felt his jaw muscles tighten. 3 months of 18-hour days, of his team pushing themselves beyond exhaustion, and the result was merely adequate. However, Zendara continued, their cultural adaptation remains questionable. They continue to ask inappropriate questions about council, procedures, and challenge established methods. Hive Speaker Zakth rose from his position, his metal-plated head gleaming under the chamber lights. "Yesterday, the human military advisor questioned the Altarian pacification protocols. Such behavior shows a lack of understanding of civilized governance." Pete Rodriguez had been sitting quietly beside Jake, but now he tensed. The pacification protocols were a method the Altarians used to keep peace on troublesome worlds. They involved changing people's memories so they would not want to fight anymore. "The protocols have brought peace to 17 worlds," said Ambassador Veltar, her crystal body flickering with light patterns that showed annoyance. "Would the humans prefer we had left those populations to destroy themselves through warfare?" Pete stood up, knowing he was breaking protocol but unable to stay silent. "With respect, Ambassador Veltar, we would prefer they had been given a choice in the matter." The chamber fell silent. Every eye, sensor, and attention organ in the vast space focused on the human military officer who had dared to speak without permission. Zendara's 4 eyes fixed on Pete with an intensity that made Jake worry for his friend's safety. "Observer, Rodriguez, you will explain this outburst immediately." Pete remained standing, his military training keeping his back straight despite the hostile atmosphere. "Council Prime, I simply noted that forcing memory changes on entire populations raises moral questions that humanity feels must be addressed." "Moral questions?" General Mordak's reptilian features twisted into what might have been anger or amusement. "Your species has killed millions in wars over pieces of land and sources of energy. You question our methods of preventing such conflicts?" "We question methods that remove free will," Pete replied firmly, "even if the results appear beneficial." The chamber erupted in sounds from dozens of different species. Clicking, whistling, harmonics, and vibrations filled the air as delegates expressed their displeasure with the humans' comments. Jake realized this was exactly the kind of confrontation they could not afford, but he also understood that Pete had stumbled onto something crucial. The council saw forced peace as success, while humans saw it as a violation of basic rights. "Silence," Zendara commanded, and the noise stopped instantly. "Observer Rodriguez has demonstrated perfectly why humanity remains unfit for council membership. Your species values abstract concepts over practical results. This thinking leads to the chaos and conflict we seek to prevent." Jake made a decision that would change everything. He stood up, violating protocol even more severely than Pete had. "Council Prime, I request permission to address this assembly under Article 15 of the Council Charter." The silence became deeper, if that were possible. Article 15 allowed any species to present evidence of immediate threats to galactic security, but it had not been used in over 2 centuries. "Ambassador Morrison," Zendara said slowly, "invoking Article 15. Without proper cause means immediate expulsion from council space. Are you willing to risk your species' future on whatever you think you have discovered?" Jake felt the weight of human history pressing down on him. Every war fought, every peace made, every dream of reaching the stars had led to this moment. Behind him, his team waited to see if their leader would gamble everything on a desperate play. "Yes, Council Prime, the threat is real, and it is much closer than any of you realize." General Mordak made a sound that was definitely reptilian laughter. The primitive humans think they can teach their superiors about danger. Very well, Ambassador. You have 1 standard hour to present your evidence. When you fail, humanity's disgrace will be complete. Jake nodded to Lisa, who quickly began setting up their portable display equipment. Maria pulled up data files they had been quietly compiling for months, while Pete prepared to provide military analysis. Honored delegates, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. 3 months ago, you dismissed humanity as chaotic and unpredictable. You have tested our diplomatic skills, our technology, and our ability to adapt to your culture. But you have never tested the one quality that defines us most clearly. He activated the display, showing star charts his team had spent months creating. You have never tested our ability to see threats that others miss. The holographic display showed subspace communication patterns stretching across the galaxy. To most observers, they looked like random static or natural phenomena, but Jake's team had found patterns hidden in the chaos. For the past century, there have been subtle changes in subspace communications throughout Council territory. Your monitoring systems have classified these as natural fluctuations or equipment errors. We believe they are something else entirely. Lisa stepped forward, her expertise in alien languages evident as she manipulated the display. These patterns show signs of artificial intelligence attempting to learn our communication methods. Someone has been studying Council species for decades. Preposterous, Zach clicked. Our border monitoring systems would detect any unauthorized presence in Council space. Would they? Jake asked quietly. Your systems are designed to detect threats you understand. Ships using faster-than-light drives you recognize. Weapons based on principles your science has mastered. Communication methods that follow known patterns. Maria activated another section of the display. Every Council species developed space travel using similar scientific principles. You all discovered the same physical laws, built comparable engines, and created similar defensive systems. Your monitoring networks are perfectly designed to detect threats from civilizations like your own. But what if the threat uses completely different technology? Pete added. What if they approach space travel, communication, and warfare in ways your science has never considered? Jake could see uncertainty beginning to replace mockery on some faces in the chamber. 18 days ago, while reviewing deep space monitoring data that your systems had ignored, we found something your sensors missed. The display changed to show gravitational readings that looked like meaningless noise to most observers. But Jake's team had learned to read the subtle patterns hidden within. A gravitational anomaly in the void sector that appears and disappears without explanation. It is too regular to be natural and too small to be a normal space phenomenon. We believe it is a cloaked fleet using technology that bends space itself to avoid detection. The chamber began to buzz with conversation as delegates discussed this possibility among themselves. Some still sounded dismissive, but others were asking serious questions. Even if we accept your interpretation, Zendara said carefully, what do you propose the Council should do? Our combined fleets represent the most powerful force in galactic history. Jake met her four-eyed gaze directly. Your fleets are powerful, but they are also predictable. You have maintained peace for so long that your military doctrine assumes enemies will fight according to rules you understand. Are you suggesting Council forces are inadequate? General Mordak's tone carried clear warning. I am suggesting they are unprepared for enemies who do not follow your rules, Jake replied diplomatically. Your military strategies assume opponents will use familiar technology, deploy in recognizable formations, and pursue logical objectives. Maria continued the explanation. Every Council species achieved peace through order and predictability. You eliminated chaos from your civilizations and your military thinking. This has created the most advanced peaceful society in galactic history. But it has also created a blind spot, Pete concluded. You cannot prepare for threats that do not think like you do. The debate continued for hours as delegates demanded more evidence, challenged human conclusions, and argued among themselves about the implications. Jake presented every piece of data his team had collected, answered every question as honestly as possible, and tried to convince beings who had never known real danger that such danger might be approaching. Finally, as the session stretched deep into the station's night cycle, Zendara called for order. The Council will consider the evidence presented by the human. The war began exactly as the enemy had planned it would. Council fleets moved to their expected defensive positions around major worlds and trade routes. The Altarians deployed their crystal battleships in perfect geometric formations that had never failed them. The Draconians arranged their Conquest-class vessels in traditional attack walls. The Zephyrians coordinated their swarm ships with hive mind precision that had kept peace for 1,000 years, and the enemy destroyed them all with surgical efficiency. Jake watched the tactical displays in the Council's Emergency Command Center with growing horror. Every move the Council forces made seemed anticipated. Every strategy was countered before it could develop. Every technological advantage was neutralized by weapons that appeared designed specifically to defeat Council defenses. 70% casualties in the first engagement, General Mordak reported, his usually steady voice shaking. The Altarian Third Fleet has been completely eliminated. Enemy weapons are passing through our shields as if they were not there. Because they know exactly how your shields work, Pete observed grimly. They have had decades to study your technology and develop specific countermeasures for every system you use. Council Prime Zendara stood at the center of the command center, her 4 arms moving in increasingly frantic patterns as reports poured in from across the galaxy. How is this possible? Our combined fleets represent the military power of 2,000 civilized worlds. Your fleets represent the military thinking of species that have not fought a real war in centuries, Jake replied, knowing his words would hurt but needing them to understand. You are fighting the last war, not this one. The main display showed the enemy advance in real time. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed almost alive, flowing around Council defenses like water around stones. Traditional battle formations meant nothing to an enemy that treated 3-dimensional space as merely a suggestion. Earth's response fleet is still 4 days away, Lisa reported from her communication station. Admiral Hayes is bringing everything. We can spare, but 37 ships cannot match this force. Numbers are not everything, Maria said, studying enemy movement patterns. Look at how they advance. Perfect coordination, maximum efficiency, no wasted motion. They fight like a machine. Because they probably are a machine, Jake realized. This level of coordination across thousands of ships, the perfect tactical responses, the ability to adapt instantly to every Council strategy. We are not fighting a conventional invasion force. We are fighting some kind of collective intelligence. Hive speaker Zakh's mandibles clicked with nervous energy. Even the Zephyrian collective cannot coordinate on this scale. This suggests integration beyond anything we have encountered. Then we need to stop thinking like we are fighting an army and start thinking like we are fighting a computer, Pete said. Computers are efficient, logical, and predictable. They optimize for known variables and prepare for expected responses. But they struggle with chaos, Jake finished, with situations that do not follow logical patterns or expected rules. Zendara turned to face the human delegation, and Jake saw something in her ancient eyes he had never expected, hope mixed with desperate need. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Morrison? Jake activated the human tactical display, showing Earth's hastily prepared response plan. We propose you stop fighting their war and start fighting ours. No traditional formations, no predictable strategies, no civilized warfare. The plan violated every principle of modern galactic military doctrine. Instead of massed fleets and Coordinated attacks, the humans suggested scattered hit-and-run tactics. Instead of matching the enemy's technological superiority, they recommended using primitive weapons and suicide attacks. Instead of defending fixed positions, they proposed a fighting retreat designed to draw the enemy into increasingly chaotic engagements. "This is insanity," General Mordak protested. "You want us to abandon every principle of modern warfare?" "We want you to abandon modern warfare entirely," Jake corrected, "because modern warfare is exactly what they prepared for. Ancient warfare, primitive tactics, desperate fighting, that is what they have not studied." "You want us to fight like barbarians?" Veltar accused, her crystal form flickering with distaste. "We want you to fight like survivors," Jake replied. "And right now those are the same thing." The debate was interrupted by urgent communications from the battle zone. Admiral Hayes had arrived with the human fleet, all 37 ships that Earth could send. Against an armada of thousands, it should have meant nothing. Instead, it changed everything. The human ships did not follow any formation the enemy could recognize. They scattered in seemingly random directions. Some headed directly toward enemy positions at full speed. Others fled toward empty space. Still others began complex maneuvers that made no tactical sense. The enemy fleet, which had been advancing with mechanical precision, suddenly hesitated. "What are they doing?" Zakth asked, watching human destroyers charge straight into enemy formations while human cruisers ran away from battles they could win. "They are being unpredictable," Pete replied with unmistakable pride. "Hayes is doing exactly what we discussed. He is making it impossible for the enemy to calculate his next move because he does not know what it will be himself." The results were immediately visible. For the first time since the invasion began, enemy ships were taking damage. Human vessels armed with primitive nuclear weapons and simple kinetic projectiles were scoring hits against opponents with technology centuries more advanced. "How is this possible?" General Mordak demanded. "Because the enemy defenses are optimized for your energy weapons and predictable targeting systems," Lisa explained. "They are not prepared for humans firing unguided missiles in random directions, hoping to hit something by accident. That is not tactics," Veltar protested. "That is chaos." "Exactly," Jake agreed. "And chaos is the one thing their perfect intelligence cannot calculate or predict." The battle continued for hours. The humans were clearly outgunned and outnumbered, but they were accomplishing something the Council fleets had not. They were surviving. More importantly, they were learning with each engagement, adapting their chaotic tactics to exploit weaknesses in the enemy's perfect coordination. "Admiral Hayes requests permission to coordinate with Council forces," the communication officer announced. Zendara looked at Jake with an expression that mixed resignation with desperate hope. "What does he need from us?" "Everything you have," Jake replied, "but not the way you have been using it. Hayes wants to integrate Council ships into human tactical doctrine, small mixed units, unpredictable movements, weapons used in ways they were never designed for." "You are asking us to abandon centuries of military evolution and scientific advancement." "We are asking you to evolve again," Jake said simply. "The question is whether you trust humanity enough to try." The silence stretched for long moments as Zendara weighed the survival of galactic civilization against her species' deepest beliefs about order, logic, and predictable behavior. Around her, the command center buzzed with reports of continued defeats and retreating fleets. Finally, she spoke words that would reshape galactic military thinking forever. "General Mordak, transmit Admiral Hayes' tactical requirements to all Council commanders. Tell them to coordinate with human forces, using human methods." She paused, clearly struggling with concepts that challenged everything she believed. "Tell them to fight like humans." As the orders went out across the galaxy, Jake felt pride mixed with terror. They had achieved something unprecedented. The Galactic Council was adopting human military doctrine. The question now was whether organized, Chaos could defeat perfect order and whether galactic civilization could survive the transformation. The war was about to take a very different direction. Delegation. Whether or not we accept your conclusions, you have Demon. The emergency session lasted 2 full days. Jake and his team presented their evidence to increasingly worried delegates as reports began arriving from across the galaxy. What had started as human paranoia was becoming confirmed fact. The first breakthrough came when Ambassador Veltar received an urgent message from her home world. Her crystal form flickered with patterns Jake had learned meant serious concern. "Council Prime," she announced, her musical voice tight with worry. "The Altarian Deep Space Monitoring Station in Sector 7 has detected gravitational anomalies matching the human data. The patterns are unlike anything in our scientific records." A wave of uneasy sounds rippled through the chamber. If the Altarians, known throughout the galaxy for their scientific precision, were confirming human findings, the situation was more serious than anyone had wanted to believe. General Mordak rose heavily from his seat, his reptilian features showing strain. "The Draconian Border Fleet has reviewed patrol logs from the past 10 years. We found 15 instances of sensor contacts that disappeared before we could investigate. When plotted according to the human timeline, they form a clear reconnaissance pattern." Jake felt mixed emotions as more species began confirming parts of their analysis. Being right about an approaching invasion was not the kind of victory anyone could celebrate. Hive Speaker Zakh's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of nervous energy Jake had learned to recognize. "The Zephyrian Collective reports disruptions in our hive mind communication networks over the past 5 years. We assumed they were caused by solar interference, but the timing matches the human report exactly." Council Prime Zendara stood slowly, her forearms moving in complex patterns that indicated deep thought and growing alarm. "If these reports are accurate, we face something unprecedented in recorded galactic history. An enemy capable of observing us for decades without detection suggests technology far beyond our current understanding." Lisa stepped forward, then caught herself and waited for permission to speak. Zendara gestured for her to continue. "The level of surveillance sophistication suggests they have been studying more than just our technology," Lisa said carefully. "The evidence indicates they have analyzed our psychology, our military procedures, our political structures, and our decision-making processes. We are facing an enemy that has spent generations learning how to defeat us." The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications. For species that had known only peace for centuries, facing an enemy that understood them better than they understood themselves was a terrifying concept. "What do you recommend we do?" asked a delegate whose species looked like walking trees. "Our combined military forces represent the strength of 2,000 worlds." Jake exchanged glances with his team. They had prepared for this moment, though he had hoped it would come under different circumstances. The Council's military doctrine is based on technological superiority and defensive positioning, Pete began, drawing on his military training. "Your fleets are designed to protect established worlds and shipping routes. You fight battles you expect to win, using weapons and tactics your opponents understand. Are you questioning the adequacy of Council forces?" General Mordak's tone carried danger. "We are questioning their preparation for this specific threat," Pete replied carefully. "Your military is incredibly powerful, but it is also predictable. An enemy that has studied you for decades would know exactly how you will deploy, what formations you will use, and what weapon systems you will employ." Maria added her cultural analysis. "Every Council species achieved peace through similar methods. You eliminated conflict through unity, superior technology, or deterrence systems. You have created the most advanced civilization in galactic history, but you have also created one with predictable responses." "And humans are different?" asked a floating creature that resembled a jellyfish made of energy. "Completely different," Jake admitted. "Humanity reached space not through unity, but through diversity. not through peace, but through controlled conflict. We have spent our entire history preparing for enemies we could not predict and situations we could not anticipate. He activated their cultural display, showing Earth's chaotic history. Every human military doctrine assumes the enemy will not fight fairly. We prepare for chemical weapons, biological attacks, nuclear warfare, electronic sabotage, psychological operations, and tactics that violate every rule of civilized combat. That sounds barbaric, Veltar observed, her crystal form dimming with what Jake recognized as distaste. It is barbaric, Jake agreed. But it has also prepared us for exactly this situation. While you have been perfecting peaceful civilization, we have been preparing for imperfect warfare. Zendara was quiet for several minutes, her ancient mind processing possibilities that challenged everything the Council represented. You suggest we need human military expertise. We suggest you need human unpredictability, Jake corrected. The enemy expects you to respond like civilized, rational Council species. They do not expect you to respond like humans, who are willing to use desperate and irrational tactics to survive. As if summoned by their conversation, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights activated, and the chamber's main display showed long-range sensor readings that made every delegate stare in horror. Massive objects were appearing throughout Council space, emerging from what had seemed to be empty regions. Ships the size of cities materialized as if they had been invisible, but there were not dozens of them. There were hundreds, then thousands, forming an armada that dwarfed every fleet in Council history. Impossible, General Mordak whispered. No force could hide a fleet of that magnitude. Lisa stared at the readings, her face pale with understanding. They were not hiding, they were already here. Those gravitational anomalies were not cloaked ships, they were dimensional gateways. The enemy has been positioning forces throughout Council territory for years. The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates began shouting orders to their home fleets and demanding immediate action. But Jake could see the panic in their movements, the uncertainty in their decisions. These were beings who had known only order and predictability for centuries, suddenly facing a threat that violated every assumption about galactic security. Reports began streaming in from worlds across the galaxy. The invasion had begun with surgical precision. Council fleets were being destroyed before they could mount effective resistance. Entire planets were being cut off from communication networks. The enemy was executing a plan they had spent decades perfecting. Council Prime! Jake's voice cut through the noise and confusion. With your permission, we would like to contact Earth immediately. If we are going to face this threat, you will need every advantage humanity can provide. Zendara looked at him with an expression that mixed desperation with distaste. Everything the Council stood for was about to be tested by an enemy that followed none of their civilized rules. Send your message, she said finally. Tell Earth that the galaxy needs human chaos. As Jake began composing the most important communication in human history, more reports arrived from the front lines. The enemy was not just technologically superior. They were fighting with perfect coordination, as if thousands of separate ships were controlled by a single intelligence. Look at these tactical readings, Pete said, studying the battle reports. Perfect formations, flawless timing, instantaneous adaptation to every Council strategy. This is not how separate commanders fight. This is how a computer would fight. Or a hive mind far more advanced than anything we have seen, Maria added. Something that can coordinate thousands of vessels across light years of space without any communication delay. Jake realized they were facing something unprecedented. Not just an invasion, but a fundamental challenge to every assumption about intelligence, warfare, and survival. The Council's perfect civilization was about to learn what humans had always known. Sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to become something monstrous yourself. The first human response came within hours. Admiral Connor Hayes, commanding the hastily assembled Earth Defense Fleet, sent a message that would have shocked the Council under normal circumstances. "Understood," his transmission read. "We are bringing everything we have. 37 ships, nuclear weapons, kinetic projectiles, and every dirty trick we can think of. If they want a civilized war, they picked the wrong species to fight." As Jake watched the tactical displays showing the enemy's methodical advance, through Council space, he felt a mixture of pride and terror. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when you forced humans to fight for their survival. The transformation of galactic warfare took 6 brutal weeks that changed everything the Council understood about conflict and survival. At first, combining human tactics with Council forces created disasters that made Jake question his entire strategy. Altarian commanders, trained for thousands of years in precise formations and calculated maneuvers, could not adapt to human concepts of controlled chaos. Zephyrian hive mind coordination, their greatest strength for centuries, became a weakness when trying to use tactics that required individual thinking and unpredictable decisions. "The Rigel System Defense Force has been destroyed," General Mordak reported during the 3rd week of combined operations. Commander Tekvar tried to use human scatter tactics, but his draconian crews could not break formation discipline. They were slaughtered because they remained predictable. Jake felt responsible for every lost life, but he also saw important patterns in the battle reports. What about the successful engagements? The Vega battle, the Proxima defense, the deep space raids? "Unusual situations," Veltar insisted, though her crystal form showed uncertainty. The human ships that won were operating independently, not as part of integrated forces. "No," Maria corrected, her analysis revealing what the military reports missed. "The successful battles all had one thing in common. They were commanded by officers who completely abandoned their training and learned to think like humans." She activated tactical recordings showing the battles in question. "Look at Commander Zalth of the Altarian 7th Fleet. Instead of deploying ships in traditional crystal formations, he scattered them randomly through an asteroid field and ordered them to fire at anything that moved. It should not have worked. But it did because the enemy could not predict targets following no logical pattern." "Or Captain Hivek of the Zephyrian Swarm," Pete added. "She deliberately broke hive mind contact and ordered each ship to act independently. The enemy computers could not handle 27 different fighting styles being used simultaneously by ships that should have been coordinated." Jake studied the reports with growing understanding. It is not about the tactics themselves, it is about breaking patterns. The enemy intelligence works by analyzing behavior and predicting responses. When we act in ways that even we do not understand, their predictions fail completely. The breakthrough came during the Battle of Kepler Station. Admiral Connor Hayes faced an enemy force 10 times larger than his combined fleet. Instead of fighting a defensive battle, he made a decision that violated every rule of space warfare. He ordered the entire Allied fleet to retreat in apparent panic, abandoning defensive positions and fleeing toward empty space. The enemy followed, confident they could destroy the fleeing forces. What they found instead was the galaxy's first example of 3-dimensional guerrilla warfare. Hayes did not retreat, Jake explained to the assembled council as they watched battle recordings. He set a trap spanning an entire star system, ships hidden in asteroid fields, inside gas giant atmospheres, behind planetary rings, using the environment itself for camouflage. When the enemy fleet arrived expecting to finish off beaten opponents, they found themselves surrounded by attackers, appearing from every direction. Human ships emerged from behind moons to launch nuclear missiles at close range. Altarian vessels hiding in nebulae fired crystal beam weapons that had been modified to scatter unpredictably. Draconian battleships that should have been fighting in formation operated as individual hunters, striking from unexpected angles. The enemy lost 40% of their fleet in the first hour, General Mordak reported, his tone mixing amazement with respect. Their perfect coordination became a weakness when they could not identify priority targets or predict attack patterns. But the real victory came when Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Earth destroyer Defiance made first contact with a damaged enemy vessel. For the first time since the invasion began, the Council learned who they were fighting. "They call themselves the Architects," Lisa reported after analyzing captured enemy data. "They are not a species in any sense we understand. They are a collective consciousness that has been engineering galactic civilizations for millions of years." The captured information revealed the true scope of the threat. The Architects had guided hundreds of civilizations toward identical technological and social development. They created peaceful, predictable societies that could be easily managed and eventually harvested for resources and genetic material. "We were never meant to be free," Zendara said quietly, her forearms drooping as she understood the implications. "Our entire civilization was designed by them to be controllable. Except for humanity," Jake realized. Earth was too distant from their influence zones. "We developed naturally, chaotically, without their guidance. We are the first species they have encountered that does not follow their design templates." The war's final phase began when Admiral Hayes proposed the most dangerous strategy in galactic history. Instead of continuing defensive operations, he suggested attacking the Architect command structure using tactics so desperate that even humans had never tried them. "We will attack their leadership using kamikaze runs, suicide ships, and boarding parties," he explained to the horrified Council. "We will fight in ways so irrational and desperate that their perfect intelligence cannot understand our actions." The assault on the Architect's stronghold was everything Hayes had promised. It was desperate, chaotic, and completely unpredictable. Human crews turned their ships into flying bombs. Altarian commanders deliberately crashed vessels into enemy formations. Zephyrian swarm ships abandoned all coordination and attacked in random patterns. The Architects, facing opponents who fought like no species they had encountered in millions of years, experienced something completely new: uncertainty. Their perfect predictive models failed when confronted with enemies willing to die for no tactical advantage, to sacrifice valuable resources for minimal gains, to act in ways that served no logical purpose. The final battle was won by Lisa Carter, the linguist who had never expected to see combat. When boarding parties failed and weapons proved useless, she manually piloted a damaged shuttle directly into the main Architect command ship, ending a war that had threatened all galactic civilization. 3 months after the war ended, Jake stood once again before the Galactic Council. But everything had changed. The chambers had been rebuilt with new defense centers. Delegates wore memorial symbols honoring the dead from dozens of species, and conversations focused on adaptation, survival, and the uncomfortable truth that their perfect civilization had been an illusion. "Ambassador Morrison," Council Prime Zendara began, her tone carrying none of the condescension from their first meeting. "The Council has reviewed humanity's role in our survival, and we have reached a unanimous decision." Jake felt his team tense behind him, uncertain what judgment awaited. "Humanity is granted full Council membership with complete rights and privileges. Furthermore, Earth will establish the new Galactic Defense Academy, where all Council species will learn the tactics that saved our civilization." "The tactics of controlled chaos," General Mordak added, his reptilian features showing what might have been a smile. "It appears the galaxy needs more human unpredictability." As genuine applause filled the chamber, Jake reflected on how much they had all changed. The Council had learned that perfection was vulnerability, that predictability was weakness, and that sometimes preserving civilization required embracing controlled barbarism. Humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not by becoming more like other species, but by teaching them to be more human. Outside the Council chambers, work was beginning on new defensive systems that incorporated chaos theory into their design. The galaxy would never again be caught unprepared by enemies who fought outside conventional understanding. And somewhere in the depths of space, other ancient intelligences observed what had happened and began making new plans. The galaxy had learned to fight unpredictably, but the universe was vast and full of threats that even human paranoia had never imagined. But that was a challenge for another day. For now, humanity had earned its place at the table where civilization's fates were decided. The galaxy was stronger for their presence, chaotic, unpredictable, and beautifully, dangerously human.